extraordinary, simple little text, the 8 verses. Usually Tibetans have this really, you know, poetic title, a more boring title than the 8 verses, you know, but the 8 verses of mind training. So this term mind training or mind transformation in Tibetan Lojong, this is a term given to this whole genre of practice, which is this more advanced level, the more radical level of the Bodhisattva teachings, which is the more radical level of the entire practice of the path to enlightenment. And it's one that is the beloved to all our Tibetan masters, you know, all our Tibetan lamas. It's this kind of the most radical way, as we described last week, what these practices are, you know, are these radical methods for smashing ego. And why you want to smash ego on this level of the path is because you have so much compassion for sentient beings that it's unbearable to not be a Buddha as quickly as possible. So the thing that's holding us back from being a Buddha as quickly as possible is ego grasping. It's all the delusions, you know. So we are desperate. That's the level of the Buddha. Like I think I kept using the analogy of Catherine, wasn't it? Being the doctor. You know, it's like such compassion that you want the toughest assignments. You want to go to the Doctors Sans Frontières every single time and go into the tents on the war zones where the missing limbs are to do the most dramatic work, because your compassion is so enormous that you have to have the most intense jobs to have the most intense suffering, because that will force you to become the best doctor in the universe. Then you can benefit sentient beings. So that's the energy behind this kind of seemingly kind of fanatic level of compassion. I mean, when we talk about compassion, we sort of think of it as very sweet and soft and having tears for little dogs getting hurt. That's just sentimental in comparison with this level of compassion that Buddha says we're all capable of, that these amazing, outrageous, courageous bodhisattvas have, you know. I mean, we talk in Buddhism, people talk in the West about getting a balance. I mean, a balance is a load of rubbish for these bodhisattvas. They're not balanced, they're fanatics. I mean, Lama Zopa Rinpoche never sleeps. That is not balanced, I'm sorry. That's fanatic. You know, because their compassion is so enormous. We can hardly imagine that level of compassion, only because we factor in the self so enormously into the center of our lives that it just seems too weird for us, you know. So this whole approach in those 8 verses is the most intense experiences of life, to totally welcome them, to see your enemy as your most precious guru, to see the person you've given your life to as your most beloved friend, to think when you meet some wacko psychopath who's completely delusional and harmful to sentient beings, to think you found a most precious treasure, that when you're with others, you think you're the lowest of all, and see everybody is supreme. I mean, these words are just too weird, you know, too strange. It's not evident to us. We just read it out of the blue. Why would you want to be like that, you know? So we have to have the context. And like that discussion we had last week with Heather, you know, this is where this does not make any sense, this level of practice, if we don't have the background of the first stages of practice. Like if you go to postgraduate, you know, about, you know, physics, you can't understand it unless you've got junior school, high school, and university. It's sort of obvious, but we often forget that spiritual teachings are like that, you know. We don't see spiritual teachings as kind of incremental, as gradual. And then when we do think of compassion, as I said, we think of something kind of soft, and you have tears. This is like intense, you know. These bodhisattvas, they talk about the courageous attitude of the bodhisattva, you know. They've already achieved bodhicitta, these people who are on this high, you know, this advanced, or maybe not quite, but there's advanced stages of this, of cultivating bodhicitta. And this is what's interesting. This is all taught in the 6. This is okay. The first stages of practice are like control your body, control your speech, back off, don't harm sentient beings. Why? Because you don't want future suffering, because you understand the law of karma. So you're really cautious, you're really careful, you really control your behavior. You become a subdued, stable person, you know. This is the first level of practice, already sublime. I mean, who can control their mouth in one day? None of us. And that's junior school level. Control your mouth, control your body. Incredible. Then you get to high school where you really can unpack and unravel your mind and become a real Buddhist. And then really get incredible renunciation by subduing your crazy delusions, by subduing your attachment and aversion and jealousy and all the neuroses. And that's according to this very specific model of the mind, according to the Buddha, which is so unique. Already you're an amazing person. Now, if you finish there, if you want to graduate there at the middle scope, graduate at the wisdom wing, graduate in high school, I like to put it, you then realize emptiness and you then achieve your own nirvana, you'd be on the Theravada path, you'd achieve your own nirvana, you become this incredible being that sees the universe as so blissful, you've gone beyond delusions, you've liberated yourself from suffering, you'd be an unbelievable person with incredible love and compassion. Of course you would, because what else is left if the delusions are gone? But then because over the centuries, the lifetimes of your hard work, your goal has been to achieve liberation. Your goal is to get the hell out of samsara. And then you've got love and compassion, there's no question. Once you've realized emptiness, once you've perfected perfected this realization and achieved liberation, the delusions are gone. There's no longer, there's no longer attachment, there's no longer anger, they're gone. Of course they're gone. Ego grasping is gone. And what have you got left? Love, wisdom, compassion, kindness, clarity, clairvoyance, amazing person. But because lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, your goal has been nirvana, your nirvana, that's your goal. And then when you get to that point in that life, whatever life you've achieved that liberation, when you die, instead of, your compassion is overridden by your bliss, because the mind is naturally blissful. When you've achieved the delusions, even when you rid the delusions, even when you've got concentration, your mind is naturally blissful. Your mind is naturally happy. It's its natural state when delusions are gone. So your bliss, and your compassion is not as strong as your bliss, and your motivation for many lifetimes to get out of samsara, that overrides your compassion, and you zap off into bliss and you don't come back. So the Theravadins say you're gone, you're finished. There's not a fraction of you left. But as His Holiness the Dalai Lama said, we have a problem with that in the Mahayanists, because the Mahayana view is your mind exists forever. It's a big difference in the Buddhist teachings, the way they're practiced and taught in the different parts of the world. But the Mahayana view is you zip off into this subtle state of bliss and you're there for eons. And then Buddha comes along and taps you on the shoulder and says, okay, baby, come out of this bliss now and come back on the Mahayana path, become a Buddha so you can benefit sentient beings. Now, if you're on the Mahayana path, you're not going to graduate at high school, you're going to graduate at postgraduate if you're on the Tibetan Buddhist path, which is including the Vajrayana. So you might even get to the point where you don't need to come back, but your compassion now overrides your bliss, because your goal is Buddhahood. And that what drives that, the energy that drives Buddhahood is compassion. This empathy with the suffering of others, which of course includes, love is subsumed in that. Love is no question, may others be happy. So all the virtues are developed. So the point is, in the Mahayana, if we understand the Lam Rim, we know that that emptiness, for example, is a Theravadan teaching. You need to realize that to get your nirvana. So it's not a Mahayana teaching in its nature. And concentration is not even a Buddhist teaching. Technically, it's a Hindu teaching. But they're not taught in the high school level. They're not taught at this level. They're taught in the context of the framework of the 6 perfections of the Bodhisattva. Because, you can easily, the danger of getting too much bliss is you forget about sentient beings. We can't even conceptualize the level of bliss, I heard one Lama say that for that Hinayana Arhat who's in nirvana, in this subtle state of bliss, their own personal bliss, when Buddha comes along and kind of says, come along on the Mahayana path, to give up that bliss is the worst, most intense suffering in the universe. It's very interesting. So this bliss is quite extraordinary, We can't imagine it. When you read Lama Yeshe's book, Mahamudra, and he talks a little bit about the qualities you'd accomplish if you'd accomplish just single point of concentration. And I mean, we've had that in many lifetimes, Buddha says. We can't even imagine the level of mind that we can accomplish. We can't even imagine it in our modern culture, in our modern psychology and neuroscience, because we only posit the brain. But these levels of mind, the Buddha says we've got to have nothing to do with a boring old brain, It's beyond that. There's a subtler level of consciousness. And the level of bliss we get, even just with concentration, even when you've temporarily subdued the delusions, the conceptual state of mind, you can't imagine the clarity of the mind. Lama Yeshe says it's like as if you can see every atom of the universe, as if you can. I mean, it's so astonishing the clarity and the bliss that we can accomplish, and that's just with single point of concentration. So the concentration, which is taught as the 5th of the 6 perfections, and the 6th perfection is the teaching on emptiness, is the wisdom where you now realize emptiness. Instead of in the high school, you don't teach it there. It's taught in the university level. In the framework of the Bodhisattva path, which is the final stages, once the Bodhisattva has accomplished love and compassion, equanimity, love, compassion, and all those, and has achieved bodhicitta, they then go to the final stages of their path where they practice the 6 perfections. For life after life after life, bopping from life to life to life, perfecting the compassion wing by practicing generosity, morality, patience, and perseverance, the first 4, and then in their meditation by perfecting concentration and then realization of emptiness. So this is then in the framework of incredible bodhicitta, that ability to have bliss is then stable, it's not a danger, because the compassion is what drives them. The compassion is the main point. All these great yogis, I mean, you know, I might have mentioned there's one of these great lamas, one of our lamas, one of Lama Yeshe's contemporaries from Sarah J, Geshe Lama Kontrog. Some of you might have met him. He passed away 20 years ago. He was when he left Tibet, he spent years and years in meditation in a hole in the wall, up in the mountains, you know, where it's 6 foot of snow in the winter, naked, no clothes, no sleep, no food. He has complete control, being a Vajrayana practitioner, complete control over his body, subtle elements in his mind and his body, and the elements of the external world. They can fly in the sky, they can manipulate the weather, because the view of this whole model of the universe, which is that everything's based on the 4 elements, they completely can control everything. Not to mention having clairvoyance, not to mention having emptiness, not to mention having bodhicitta. And as his Lama Zopa said, he lived in Vajrayogini's pure land. You know? So there's this bliss, inconceivable bliss, but there was never a danger that's going to ever sidetrack them, because they've got this unbelievable compassion, unbearable compassion, as Lama Zopa says. You know, I mean, Lama Zopa, we all know, he's renowned for never sleeping, which is, again, fanatic. It sounds insane. Why wouldn't he sleep? Well, first of all, he doesn't need to. He's like Geshe Lama Kontrog. He lives in bliss. He's got complete control over his body, speech, and mind at the subtlest level, has had clairvoyance and bodhicitta and all the rest. But the compassion, he doesn't need to sleep, but compassion is what drives every tiny thing they think and do. Even their breath is based on bodhicitta. You know? So it's really this level of talking. It's like talking about a saint. Literally, bodhisattvas are what we call saints. But we think saints are these odd people who pop up out of the blue every now and again, and you don't have courses where you can become a saint. You're just kind of born like it. You know, God makes you that way. Not like that. The bodhisattva path is becoming a saint, an insanely over the top qualified saint. I mean, the lowest level bodhisattva, once you've achieved emptiness and you're an Arya bodhisattva, a superior being, you've achieved realized emptiness on the bodhisattva path, and there are 10 stages before you achieve Buddhahood. So you go through each stage. So even the lowest level bodhisattva, because of the power of their mind, the power of their realization of emptiness, and the power of their bodhicitta, they're able to manifest their mind in 100 different forms simultaneously, and that progresses, as Lama Zopa says, like 100 times or 1,000 times each stage, till you get to the point, and this is where it literally is like science fiction for us. Literally, you get to the point where you become a Buddha. You're capable. You have the three essential qualities of a Buddha: compassion, wisdom, and power. So you have the compassion because ego is completely gone, ego grasping, and the delusions are gone. There is only a sense of connectedness with others, as if you were them. There's no longer a sense of a separate self. This is so abstract for us. It's just too bizarre for words, you know. And they have infinite empathy for sentient beings, and it's spontaneous, only to benefit everyone. But that's not enough. Compassion is not enough. This is Holiness says, you've got to have wisdom. So real wisdom is realizing emptiness, seeing, and that means eventually when you're a Buddha, it's literally omniscience, seeing that which exists. For the Buddha, I want to talk today in the 8 verses. The 8th verse is where we can talk about emptiness, okay? That's the final of those 8 verses. I think we went through them all, didn't we? I think we went through the 8 verses. We didn't. Only one. Oh, I better read them all for the sake of it. We can read them. Okay, and then I want to talk about emptiness today. Because without emptiness, this is not possible. What we're talking about is not possible, you know, is not possible. Not possible. Not possible. So the Buddha, omniscience, that sees that which exists. Everything that exists for the Buddha, by definition, is that which can be cognized by mind. Whose mind? Your mind, baby, when you've completely enlightened it, when you've removed all the delusions from it, you know. You can see that which exists automatically. It's axiomatic that which exists is that which can be cognized by mind. So finally, that's seeing that which exists. That's the power of the Buddha's mind. But third, so that means you can see the minds of all beings, their exact karma, and know exactly how to benefit everyone. So it's compassion that wants to benefit. It's wisdom to know how to benefit. But the third one is what they call power, which is this ability to do it. And that includes the ability to manifest your mind in trillions of forms throughout trillions of universes for the sake of trillions of sentient beings for as long as time exists. That's a Buddha. I mean, that's extreme, but that's the potential and the energy that drives this. In a sense, when you think of, I mean, you know, it seems to me, even just looking at an ordinary, emptiness is almost easy if you compare with bodhicitta, when you start to understand the level of what bodhicitta means, the unbelievable power of bodhicitta. And that's the difference between the mind of a Hinayana Arhat and the mind of a bodhisattva. Emptiness is the same. Once you realize emptiness, and you can't realize it more. The power of the Buddha is coming from the bodhicitta. The power is from bodhicitta. This insane attitude that's gone beyond delusions, gone beyond a separate sense of self, infinite, and that just grows to such levels. And that's finally what conquers all the nonsense from the mind. And finally enables a person to become a Buddha. So it's kind of outrageous. It's not like normal. And these teachings, this method of Lojong to accomplish bodhicitta, the extreme radical method of smashing the obstacles to achieving it, which is ego grasping and self-cherishing, these teachings were kept secret. Atisha received them, I think, Atisha's Indian, and he was this amazing holy being, and he went and spent many years with his guru Selingpa in Indonesia, in Sumatra. Maybe you've been there. There's this big sort of United Nations or something, big, what do you call it, Borobudur, big place there. And Vajrayana was rich there a long time ago, flourishing. And Sumatra's further along from Java, one of the islands there. So he spent many years there. And I think he received all these teachings on bodhicitta. I'm not sure exactly. I'm not very good at history. I'm sorry. And then when he gave these teachings in Tibet, when he finally went to Tibet, they were kept, the lineage was secret, because these are so opposite to normal life. I mean, even Milarepa, the way he said is ordinary Dharma. He said, whatever Dharma is, it's the opposite to ordinary life. It's the opposite, exact opposite. What life is, Dharma's opposite. So it's kind of intense, even ordinary Dharma. But this Lojong, this level, this way of exchanging self for others is extreme, That's what we've been talking about, isn't it? And all part of all that whole practice is the one of using problems, happily using problems as grist for your mill. And the reason is because you can't bear the suffering of the sentient beings, and you see you're not qualified yet. You've got to be qualified. You can't help them. Your hands are tied. So you've got to become a Buddha. So how? Get rid of delusions as quick as possible. Give me the problems, baby. Bring it on. And that's what smashes, obviously, delusions, So the best we can do is hear it, understand the incredible level of it, and then do what we can according to our capacity. And that's something I think I kept stressing. We have to know where we're at, what we're capable of, I mean, I remember Courtin Rinpoche says, to do this level of teachings, you've got to be a suitable vessel. Well, to go to postgraduate physics, you've got to be a suitable vessel. You've got to do junior school, high school, university. It's pretty obvious. And here that means you've got to know what you're capable of. So if I'm in a miserable relationship with my pathetic boyfriend Andrew, who's horrible and mean, and I'm a victim and useless and crying and complaining and moaning, I'm not being horrible, but look at our suffering, then I'm not ready to start, accepting his punches with a happy mind. I've got to get the hell out of his life, leave the man, have some courage to get the hell out. That's what I've got to do. But if I'm in a relationship with him and I'm, this advanced practice and trying to be, and know there's some karma we have to be together, but you have some confidence about that. You've got to make a choice. It's my relationship. This is what I need to be doing. This is the right place for me at the right time. Then I will eat the abuse for breakfast. That's, this is shocking in our culture. Shocking, I don't know if I mentioned the story of my mother's friend, Sheila, who had a crazy, abusive, drunken husband. Did I mention that story? I always like to tell this. My mother was a Catholic, right? And she had my darling daddy was a ridiculous man. I love my father so much, but he's a bit of an alcoholic, a bit useless. Wasn't so cool in the way he behaved, did certain things, wasn't so cool with his daughters, different things, whatever, it doesn't matter. I love my father. But, my mother had all this suffering. She had 7 children. We were struggling for money. It was really difficult, blah, blah, blah. Typical life of all people suffering, And one of my mother's dear friends was Sheila, who lived, she's this working class lady with this abusive, ugly husband, Reg, whatever, with several children. He had 5. My mother had 6 daughters and she had 6 sons, I think. So I love going to Sheila's, probably because of the sons. I forgot to remember, but I love going to Sheila's. But the thing was, Sheila was this fanatic Catholic, but completely in love with God. And as far as she was concerned, God was in everybody. And she really meant it. And she couldn't care less. She had such renunciation. She was hilariously funny. She smoked about 80 Marlboros a day. She lived on bread and butter and cups of tea. And this abusive husband would come home at lunch and kind of, literally rape her. But it was like a joke to her. She couldn't care less, because as far as she was concerned, he was one of her children. He was like her 7th child, you know. I mean, I really mean, there are people who are like this. It was water off a duck's back for her. It was like nothing to her. She couldn't care. She was clearly conscious in that relationship. As far as she was concerned, God was in Reg. Reg was ridiculous. She put up with his nonsense. It did not cause her any suffering whatsoever. Now, we would think in our culture, no, that's not possible. She has to be, she was a victim. She was accepting the stuff. She was kind of abused by him. No, not at all. And this is where emptiness comes in. We have to talk about emptiness. This is, without all that, this is nonsense, this path, you know. As Lama Zopa said one time, which is very shocking for our ears, he said, if you don't feel abused, where is the abuse? This is very logical. And this is the whole, this is, we could talk the rest of the talk on this. This is all implying this way that things exist as far as Buddha is concerned, that everything that exists out there is seen and experienced through the lenses of our mind. This is hard to hear. This is the essential meaning of emptiness. Nothing exists in the way it appears to us. Everything is experienced, you know, if it's suffering, it's all related, it's seen and experienced through the lenses of our delusions. The more our delusions, the more our suffering. This is logic for Buddha. Of course, hearing this in the beginning is quite shocking because it sounds like Buddha's blaming us. You know, I'm the blame. Well, in a sense, you could say that, but he doesn't use it like that. We use it in that heavy way. I'm the blame, you know. Buddha finds someone to blame. Buddha's the view of karma is, this is junior school, is realizing, as Lama Zopa said, everything is our own karmic appearance. Everything that appears to us, everything we see, hear, taste, touch, smell, the way we experience it. One, we think it exists out there on its own, like that, set in stone, absolutely, definitely true. That's the function of ego grasping, the colloquial term used for the root delusion called ignorance, that sees everything as having an intrinsic nature, as existing set in stone, we say in our culture. It's a really nice term. Nothing exists like that. Nothing exists like that. So the more we understand karma and then control our delusions in the second scope, and then come to the bodhisattva path and start to, you know, realize, get compassion, then and start transforming problems, you know, emptiness is completely integrated into that view. Without understanding that nothing has an intrinsic nature, you know, to hear the term, if you don't feel abused, where is the abuse? This is exactly the meaning of emptiness, that everything exists in how we call it. We label it that way. And that's how we experience it. But there's nothing from the side of that thing. And this is where, you know, we're going to talk about this. So the 7th, maybe we'll read, I think. I kept jumping around, but there's so much we have to talk about in our last day together. So I'll just read the verses. And if you've got them there, fine. If not, just contemplate the meaning. No, I'm sure, didn't we talk about it? You mean we didn't do the verses? I really thought we did.
We did 5 or 6, I think.
We did. That's what I thought. Exactly. Well, just just contemplate the meaning. Just listen to the words, okay? Oh, you got it. Okay, good, Catherine. Thank you. Let's just read them together. Keep your Zoom off. Keep your Zoom off. Turn your Zoom off, Jackie.
Oh, sorry.
No, don't worry, darling. And then we'll just read to yourselves and I'll read it out. So just to the degree that we have any understanding of the meaning of these verses, we make this aspiration. If we're on this path, we want to achieve all this. We mightn't be ready yet, but just think, may I be able to have these views so I really can do this like all the holy beings before me, like all my lamas, like all His Holiness the Dalai Lama, they've all achieved this. So may I be able to do that, you know. So determined to obtain the greatest possible benefit from all sentient beings who are more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel, I will hold them most dear at all times. When in the company of others, I'll always consider myself the lowest of all, and from the depths of my heart hold others dear and supreme. Vigilant, the moment a delusion appears in my mind, endangering myself and others, I'll confront and avert it without delay. Whatever I see beings who are wicked in nature, the psychopaths, okay, use our current word, and who are overwhelmed by violent negative actions and suffering, I will hold such rare ones dear as if I had found a precious treasure. When out of envy, others mistreat me with abuse, insults, or the like, I'll accept defeat and offer the victory to them. When someone whom I have benefited and whom I have great hopes gives me terrible harm, I'll regard that person as my holy guru. So this verse is where I think this is a source of Tonglen. We did talk about Tonglen. We did discuss that practice. We did, yes. This, I think, is the source of it. So in short, both directly and indirectly, directly means you'll actually do it indirectly in your own mind, practicing. Do I offer every happiness and benefit to all my mothers, and I'll secretly take upon myself all their harmful actions and suffering. And this is the last one. Undefiled by the stains of the superstitions of the eight worldly concerns, may I, by perceiving all phenomena as illusory, be released from the bondage of attachment. This is implying emptiness. Yes, and we'll talk about, but the eight worldly dharmas we'll talk about, which I think, again, we've touched on, and this last one where we talk about how everything is illusory. That all phenomena are illusory is a way of presenting how phenomena exist conventionally. Their being empty of intrinsic nature is a way of presenting how they exist ultimately, and they both, of course, come to the same thing. So we'll discuss these. Thank you, Catherine. That's lovely. So let's first of all look at these eight worldly dharmas. I don't know if we've implied it, but it's such a cute, an odd phrase. You know, when you first hear it, you don't know what they're talking about. You know, it's so abstract. But what it is really just 8 ways of presenting how attachment is pervasive. We learn about, okay, there's 2 different things here to understand. First of all, we will hear in the compassion literature, in the Bodhisattva path literature, the enemy is called self-cherishing. But when we hear in the first stages of practice in the wisdom wing, we hear that attachment is the enemy. So when you understand about the delusions and you study the Buddhist model of the mind, when you study low rig, you learn all the different states of mind, the 3 root delusions. There's ego grasping, which gives rise to attachment, which gives rise to anger, and all the other 83,900 and whatever they are, these delusions the Buddha talks about. So that's correct. It's in the text. You'll find a thing called, attachment. But you won't find one in that list called self-cherishing, because it's like this, you see. The main enemy in the first stage is we're trying to give up attachment, because that's the main suffering that causes us to be greedy and grasping and to harm sentient beings and lie and steal and kill. So we have to learn to subdue the body, speech, and mind. Now in the compassion wing, the emphasis, the first stage emphasis is on keeping ourselves out of the way, subduing ourselves, and not harming sentient beings, In the compassion wing, the main goal is now shifted to want to benefit sentient beings. We want to benefit sentient beings. So the main enemy here, is now called selfishness. The Tibetans call it self-cherishing. We say selfishness, putting self first. So you could actually say it's a result of attachment. When you've got attachment, you're attached to getting what you want. So you are becoming very selfish. So here the enemy is cherishing self more than others. So the whole thing we're doing through those 11 stages that culminate in bodhicitta, we're eventually going to be making this paradigm shift where now we have exchanged self for others. We now cherish others more than self. So that's the whole framework of understanding. So the enemy across the board, and you hear Lama Zopa teaches all he talks about, self-cherishing. It's a consequence of attachment, and which is a consequence of ego grasping, the root delusion. So we've got to fit all these things fit. You've got to understand it from studying, that's the point. So the 8 worldly dharmas is presented in the Mahayana path. It's presented at this level of the more advanced stages of achieving bodhicitta, the transforming problems level. You hear about it across the board in all the teachings because it pervades among the Tibetans, how they talk. But it's taught in this framework. It's a more pervasive way of understanding how attachment, or it's a way of understanding how attachment pervades our lives. So in the first stages, when we go to high school and middle school, we learn about the mind, we study low rig. The main way we're trying to subdue attachment here is in terms of controlling attachment to the objects of the senses. That's the first level. That's the grosser level. Here, because we've got more of an understanding of our mind now, we can now see the more pervasive, more primordial levels of attachment. They control our lives completely. Or in other words, they are the main motivation for everything we think and do and say. If we're a regular samsaric person, and including those of us who are trying to be nice, holy people, this level of attachment described in the eight worldly dharmas is just pervades everything. It's the fundamental, it's the motor that propels everything we think and do and say, which shows how primordial it is. I always quote it. Lama Yeshe said, I can tell you about attachment for 1 whole year. We will never begin to comprehend it until we start to do the work deeply inside, as we start to practice, in other words, So the eight worldly dharma is just 4 pairs, and there's different way that the lamas describe them. You know, I mean, I'll just quote here, for example. Oh, it doesn't matter. I'll just say them in my own words. It's okay. Each of the lamas presents them slightly different. They all present them slightly differently. But we'll explain. So and they're often in different order as well. But in general, the first level of attachment is that every millisecond we're driven by. Attachment at this level. Attachment is just at the level of an assumption. It's not, oh, I'd like something. It's just it's the level of an assumption, and the assumption is that happiness is what I get when I get what I want. It's good when we have nice feelings. That is happiness. That's the technical definition of happiness, having pleasant feelings. So then attachment drives us to only get the nice feelings, which means I've got to get what I want every millisecond. So the attachment is driving us every second, this assumption that happiness, that the good feelings is what happiness is. So now what happens is the millisecond you meet something that triggers unpleasant feelings, the attachment shifts from wanting the pleasant feelings to now wanting to be free of the unpleasant feelings. So it never ceases. It's always there. It's constantly changing its object. So, you know, when it's a cold day and you're walking home and you've got 3 minutes to go and the wind is really biting, every second, there's attachment, every second you're anticipating being, in that 3 minutes time, you'll be free of that suffering. Because one of the functions of attachment, one of them, many of them, is always to be anticipating something, desperately wanting something, frantically anticipating it. So when you're walking in that cold and the unpleasant feeling, all attachment wants is to be free of the unpleasant feeling. And then you're anticipating it every second, every second. You get to the house and you open the door, you walk in and, oh, phew, attachment now gets what it wants. But guess what happens? Like in this house here, it's so toasty and warm and I have all the heater on, it's all lovely and delicious. Then on a hot day, the sun comes through and suddenly, you know, it's 85 degrees in here. So I've got to put the AC on, you know. So every second of the day, I'm either wanting to be free of the cool, so I put the heater on, or I want to get the heat, so I put the heater on, put the other one, you know. So attachment is running all of that every single second. Every time you're sitting there, you're tired, you're standing up. And you're tired. So attachment only wants to be free of the suffering of being tired. So you sit down. So suddenly attachment gets what it wants, but the next millisecond, now attachment's, you know, starting to be dissatisfied about sitting. So every second, this attachment is always craving pleasant feelings or craving to be free of unpleasant feelings. And it's unceasing and it's all day. And until you're a highly realized being, even if you're a nice person, this is what's going on. And this is the level of practice. And this is where transforming problems comes in. You're tired. And all you're anticipating is to stop being tired. We get stressed, you know. When we're like this, when we have all this attachment, we conflate physical pain and tiredness, for example, with anger. So we assume when I'm tired, I've got to be distressed. We assume that if I've got a headache, I must feel distressed. We don't recognize the body is one thing, but the mind is another. And that's where transforming problem comes in. You've got a headache and you can't get your pill immediately because you're not home. You've got 2 hours to get home yet. You've got no aspirins. So you've got to, instead of being fretting out and stressing this headache, I can't stand it, and building up all the tension, attachment is frantic to be free of the suffering. So we don't realize that's the moment to start practicing. That moment is to start practicing. And what does that mean? Welcoming the headache. If you can take a pill right then, but if you haven't got one in your pocket, you've got 2 hours to get home, you've got no choice. So that's the moment you quit the attachment to want to be free of the suffering and you greet the headache. And that means your mind can stay happy. You've still got a headache. No problem. But this is and I've heard about this with people now in the medical profession talking about methods to work with pain. We're seeing this. It's a cognitive thing. We never realize that you can stop being angry with the pain. We just think, naturally, I'm angry. Of course I'm angry. I've got pain. No, that's your mind. So then as soon as we can learn to greet the problem, your suffering becomes less. This is also proving emptiness. This is ordinary practice. Don't wait till you're put on death row, accused of killing some policeman when you didn't do it, to do this practice. Don't wait till something terrible happens. You can do this every second of the day. This is so clear, you know. This is a powerful level of practice. And this is how your mind becomes subdued. But the second the headache comes, we have to fix it. The second the discomfort comes, we've got to stand up. The second you're tired, you've got to sit down. And that's when we get stressed. And that's why people like, I'm thinking of Catherine in all the hospitals and all the hardworking people are living and dying, dealing with suffering patients. This is why people go mad, because they don't, and it's not blaming them, because they don't realize they've got anger and resistance and resentment and resistance to the suffering. That's when we can go crazy, because we're not working on our minds, because we don't catch it quick enough, you know. That's why you do meet people who do have very natural patience from practicing in past lives. They're capable of doing this. They're able to have the difficulties, have the problems, and because they've programmed their minds from past practice, they mightn't even be conscious of it. They're not spiritual practitioners, but they're capable of it. That they can adjust themselves, and they can literally greet the problem and not go crazy. So it's because we've got lots of attachment and lots of aversion. That's why we suffer when bad things happen. It's normal, it's natural. Don't blame anybody. But this is the Buddha's analysis of why we suffer. We think we suffer because all the people are suffering. We think we suffer because the world's a horrible place. We think we suffer because we have a headache. No. And this is tough to hear. This is very precise analysis we have to do. And this is the Buddha's analysis. And that's when we can change. So this is the first pair of, you know, attached to happy feelings and attached to being free of unhappy feelings. And that's the most pervasive of all. Because when you look at the Buddha's view of the mind, if you look at the third category of states of mind, where the positive, the negative, and the neutral, they call it, but neutral is misleading. That's why I like to call them the mechanics of the mind. Concentration, good memory, recognition. There's many of these that you need to function, whether you're a murderer or a meditator. They're not virtues in their nature, but they're necessary. So in that category, oddly, there's one that's called feeling. And in Buddha's view, we only have three kinds of feelings. It's not used as a synonym for emotions. We either have pleasant feelings, unpleasant feelings, or neutral feelings. Well, let's forget the neutral. We live our lives desperately attached to the pleasant feelings, because that's another word for happiness. When we think happiness, because we're so addicted to believing the outside world is the cause of happiness, we conflate the outside world with the experience of happiness. No. The cake is not happiness. But even, you know, Catherine says, Robina, how are you today? Oh, I'm so happy. Tell me about your happiness. I will describe the events that happened. I won't describe my mind. I will describe the lovely things that happened, because we're so used to believing that's happiness. When we remember happy feelings, we think of the events. When we remember unhappy feelings, we think of the events because we believe they're the cause. No. Happiness is a mental state, and it's known as a pleasant feeling. So we've got a spectrum. Of course, if you're in such single point of concentration, you're in, as Lama Yeshe says in Mahamudra, you're experiencing rapture, you're experiencing ecstasy, and he means it. That's really best happy feelings. And you've got mild happy feelings, you know, a whole spectrum. Then you've got unpleasant feelings, and that's another word for suffering. That's it. Suffering is unpleasant feelings. The external world is a trigger for them, but they're not the suffering itself. This is the crucial point we have to understand, you know. So then this ego, this attachment in this level is this is the deepest level of all. The bottom line of attachment, primordial, is a desperate assumption that this fantasy I must get what it wants every second, because that, as far as we're concerned, is what will trigger happy feelings. And all we are, so really all attachment doesn't want a handsome boy. Attachment doesn't want cake. Attachment wants the pleasant feelings that are triggered when we have contact with the boy and the cake. So the attachment wants happy feelings, bottom line. And being samsaric in this dualistic world we live in, as far as we're concerned, the only method we know for triggering happy feelings is getting an object. That's it. That's what samsara is, you know. Complete misconception, Buddha says. And he happens to be telling us, okay, babies, I have found a method to get such bliss, happiness, that you can't even imagine it. And it's free and cheap. And all you've got to do is get single point of concentration. Not to mention give up your delusions. Then you're going to get such bliss you won't believe it. That's the misconception of samsara, you know. And this is the hardest one to give up. So it's so primordial. So I have to blow my nose. So then the next pair, or sometimes a different order, is this constant assumption that I must receive things, get what I want, get nice things, get things. And when you don't get things, the assumption the attachment shifts to becoming free of not getting things. And this might depends on the person, yeah, but we can see that this is a huge attachment for some of us, and for all of us. We've got to get things, you know. But never mind that one, don't worry. I mean, not whatever. I don't know what to say about that one. But the next ones, And each of us is different. But the next two are very powerful, outrageous. These are so shocking. And often we hear them as the same, but they're different. So the next one is this constant craving to hear nice words, to hear sounds with my name in them. Basically, it's called praise. I mean, we mightn't think we want praise. I'm sorry. We do, frantically and desperately. Now, and then the opposite of that one, to be free of being, criticized. But the next one seems similar, but they're quite different, and we need to look at these. And this next one is sort of the most pervasive. It's called attachment to reputation. So they're two separate things. One is directly when you're in a conversation with somebody and they say nice words about you. It's like nectar in heaven. We're hungry to hear those words. And the second we hear somebody criticizes, even we hear somebody from behind our back criticize us, it's beyond pain. So we are desperate, frantic. This attachment is constantly there to hear praise, which is nice sounds with my name in it, and then to be free of hearing sounds that are ugly sounds about my name, basically. And because we take these for granted as being normal parts of normal people. We don't question them. We just think, well, that's normal. Of course we all need praise. We think it's normal. We factor it in as something normal, meaning you'd be weird if you didn't have it. But Buddha's pointing it out as a function of ego grasping, and therefore has to be annihilated. Otherwise, you're always going to continue to suffer, But the reputation one is most interesting because that's the one that I think in our heads is there all the time. We're constantly talking to ourselves about ourselves, and we're imagining ourselves talking to other people about us, wanting to share all our thoughts with another person, telling another person. Either when a person's been mean to us, we have all these endless conversations in our head, imagining the other person and telling them what we want to tell them, and desperate that they hear us and approve of us, or we're constantly just wanting to share everything with another person. Like if you live with somebody, if you have a partner, one of the things that we find so marvelous about a partner, well, I haven't got one, but I know from people telling me, is that you share everything with them. This is the thing that people want most deeply. And I'd say from the deluded point of view, from a good point of view, it's marvelous to have friends. It's marvelous to share. That's called compassion. That's called empathy. That's fantastic. But we're making the distinction between that and when it's coming from attachment. We don't make that distinction in our culture. So this one, since we're born, it's like, this is the, Lama Yeshe would often talk about we're all schizophrenic, and don't be insulted by that. People, when I say that, sometimes people think I'm being very rude. But Lama, it's this disconnect we have. We're totally having ego grasping and having attachment to get what that fantasy I wants. These are the deepest delusions, and attachment effectively is running the show. And it's a symptom of a disconnected person. It's a symptom of being literally a separate person. Being a separate person is the result of unbelievable delusions. It's complete delusion to be a separate self. So one of the functions of having attachment is, and this is where the energy of it is dissatisfaction. We're never feeling we're enough. I'm not enough. And that's the energy of all attachment. And that's from practicing attachment in past lives. We come into this life programmed with deep feeling of not being enough. So that depends on the person, So when you're a tiny baby, your mother, you're feeling dissatisfied. You don't know why, you're just crying, you're miserable, And then your mummy touches you, or she smiles at you. Well, for a moment, you'll feel so happy because she just approved of you. And then it's like you do something funny and your mummy laughs at you. Already, it's programmed in your mind that works. I must do that again tomorrow, and then tomorrow, mummy hits you instead. No wonder we get confused, because all we're wanting is the person in front of us to smile back at us. And in all our life, that's what we're trying to do. We are adjusting our behavior every second. We're constantly watching what other people are hearing. When they see us, we're watching how they're thinking about us. We're watching what they're saying. And we're constantly adjusting our behavior, adjusting what we say to get them to give us nice feedback. And that's how desperate we are having attachment, being a separate sense of self. This attachment is a symptom of a really mentally ill person, basically. And that's all of us, join the universe. But we think it's normal. But no, we can see some people have it much worse than others. You can see some people who are bottomless pits of emotional neediness. That's this attachment. So in our culture, of course, we look back at what happened when they were a little girl. Well, their mother must have been mean to them. They were rejected, you know. So that we think is the reason. No, that's not the reason. The reason is you're born with very strong attachment due to past lives, so you're never satisfied. And the particular way it functions for you is that you're never satisfied with yourself. You assume you're nothing. You know, so therefore you're always hungry for other people to feed back to you that you're a nice person. That's what we're frantically desperate for. So this pair is we're constantly wanting people to approve of us, not praise us. That's words. This is more primordial. It's there all the time. We need other people's approval to make us feel we're a real person. We don't feel like we're real or valid until someone else smiles at us. And this is why we go mad. This is what you think loneliness is. What do you think loneliness is? I've got no one to share my thoughts with. You've got to ask yourself the question, what is the problem with my thoughts? That they're not valid until someone else hears them. This is very bizarre, but this is how needy we are. We vomit out to get a person to hear us. So we can see that's why we suffer, and this is because of this attachment. It's the one that is the final one to go. They talk about the great yogis in the mountains who've given up everything, but they're still thinking in their mind about what the people in the village are thinking about them. And this is what preoccupies our mind most of the time. We're not always wanting praise, you know. We're always wanting pleasant feelings, but we're always constantly in our mind this conversation. And when we have self-loathing, all that is low self-esteem. And all that is dissatisfaction. I am not worthy because nobody loves me. And that's where when it's so strong, you can have 57 people praise you. It's never enough. We're a bottomless pit of dissatisfaction, and no matter how much we get, not enough. No matter how much someone praises, not enough. No matter how much someone approves, not enough. No matter how much my boyfriend tells me he loves me, never enough. This, as Lama Zopa said, this is the main suffering in our modern world, you know. This is attachment. Attachment to reputation, attachment to being seen and heard, attachment to being seen as a nice person. And this is why we're all schizophrenic, and we're so the way Lama Yeshe puts it, we're so inauthentic. We cannot say what we really feel. We're desperate. That's why we feel like people talk about feeling like a fraud. If you've got the karma to be successful, and we don't know why we have that, we don't know why we're successful, because we know we think we're a fraud and someone's going to catch out. But that's because of past karma that you're successful. Why you are successful being an actor, let's say, it's not because you're such a good actor. It's because you've got past karma to be successful. That's why you're successful. And that's why people feel like they're a fraud. People are going to catch one day that I'm really not a good actor at all. And people live in terror. That's the hunger to be seen as a good person. You're getting it all, but it's never enough. Look at Marilyn Monroe. I mean, she to me is the most amazing example. The world adored everything about it. You just can't stop watching. I mean, it depends if you like Marilyn Monroe. I love her. You just can't stop watching her. You can't stop hearing her. She's just divine. She'd be in a crowd of 1 million soldiers blissing out. She'd be in concerts, but she had this unbelievable bottomless pit of dissatisfaction. No matter what she got, no matter how much praise, it was never enough. This is more than just now the fourth one. This is all the 8 worldly dharmas. So therefore was totally self-centered, totally obsessed with herself. You know? I think we recognize all of these. And this is the most pervasive way attachment functions, you know. This is what being in samsara means. This is what suffering is caused by. So giving up attachment is the cause of bliss, you know, not even realizing emptiness yet. Any questions, people? Any questions? Nothing? No questions? Okay, no worries. So let's talk about emptiness then. Why that's so crucial for transforming problems, for exchanging self for others. I mean, all these come together, you know, they've got the compassion and wisdom wing completely go together. They enhance each other. So this is where the point is, you can have bodhicitta to the most intense degree, but you can lose bodhicitta until a certain level. You can lose bodhicitta, but you cannot lose wisdom. You cannot lose emptiness. Once you've cut the root, you've cut the root. It can't grow again. You know? So bodhicitta is not enough, and wisdom is not enough. Bird needs 2 wings. Okay. So let's just talk about emptiness, different ways of talking about it, okay? As far as Buddha is concerned, in general, he's saying that we are suffering because we have misconceptions in the mind. We're suffering because we've got delusions. That's it. It's very simple what he's saying. It's not complicated. They're the main cause of our suffering. So we have to work on those at different stages. In the first stages of practice, you just control the servants of your delusions. You just control your body and speech, get them under control. Then you go to high school, the middle scope, and you start to control attachment. You get renunciation. As Lama says, Lama Zopa says, you've got renunciation when just the thought of another moment of attachment is so disgusting. It's like being in a septic tank. So that's advanced. I mean, renunciation is outrageous. But that's where you really go into the delusions and you harness the branch delusions. Now you get to the bodhisattva path and you're getting bodhicitta first. And then in your 6 perfections, you're combining your continuous practice in relation to sentient beings of the first 4 of the perfections and then in your meditation, you're perfecting your realization of emptiness. You're getting your realization. They enhance each other. So the reason we suffer across the board is because of delusions, and then because of past karma and delusions, as it says in the 4 Noble Truths. So then specifically here, then we're going to be looking at the root delusion. We've got the branch delusions and the root delusions. The root delusion, this cause of all of the suffering in the first place, is called literally ignorance. Ma rigpa in Tibetan. Ma rigpa in Tibetan. Unawareness. And so ignorance is a very general word. Like all these words, they're quite specific, quite precise in their definition. So this ignorance is like double trouble ignorance. Regular ignorance is like, you don't know what that color is. What's that color, Robina? I don't know. That's easy ignorance to fix. That's simple, ordinary not knowing something. And if we had that level of ignorance when it comes to the Dharma, we could get enlightened in a couple of years. I wouldn't be surprised, because there's nothing to hinder nothing to hinder my recognition of the truth. I simply don't know the truth. Please tell me the truth. It's black. Thank you. Now I know the truth. But the problem is, the double trouble ignorance is, I think it's pink. I'm convinced it's not what it is. So that's the problem. That's the problem. That's the problem of this ignorance we've got. So not only, in other words, for the Buddhists telling us, this ignorance, what it clings, what it believes, what this ignorance believes, this specific ignorance, this root ignorance, what it believes is that, and these are the words for it, and we have to unpack it. Everything has an independent nature. Everything exists independently. Everything exists inherently. That's it. We believe, the truth is that everything exists. The truth is everything is empty of that. That's the truth. But we don't know that truth. Not only do we not know that nothing has an intrinsic nature, not only do we not know it's not black, we think it is pink. So that's the mistake. And we have to rip that lie out of your mind to get to have the space to see the truth, because we are addicted to the lie, have been for eons, that it's pink. And it even appears pink to us. And we believe it's pink, and we'll give our life for the fact that it's pink. So the lie here is, the truth is, nothing has an intrinsic nature. That's easy. The words are easy. But we believe not just that it's pink, we believe the exact opposite of the truth. We believe everything has an intrinsic nature, and we have clung to that since beginningless time, Buddha tells us. That's the problem. Realizing that everything's empty of intrinsic nature, if we didn't think things were the opposite, we could realize it in a second. Just someone tells you, oh, I get it. So the problem is believing in the lie. The problem is believing in the lies. That's the level of ignorance that we have. That's the killer. So mere ignorance, not knowing how things exist, no big deal. You could argue. But believing the opposite of the truth is the problem. And we have believed in it and cling to it. And it's so primordial that absolutely everything appears to us to have an intrinsic nature. So, of course, this is so subtle, we just get confused. What are you talking about? Whoever thought they were suffering because you thought things had an intrinsic nature? What? Because it's so primordial. The mistake is so complete and so absolute and so intrinsic and so deep in our mind that everything appears to us like that. But even that is confusing. What do you mean things appear to exist from their own side? We don't even know what it means because the mistake is so absolute. This is why it's hard to hear. Even the words. So we've got to start with the words. Okay, there are different methods. If you're going to realize Mahamudra, there's a different technique. Here, we're going to use the traditional technique of learning the theory first and thinking about it, deconstructing it, analyzing it, and eventually the penny drops and you get the realization of it. That's the system here. So let's look at different methods for understanding emptiness. Understanding how nothing has an intrinsic And then we have to ask, well, why should I care? Because, honey, all suffering, all universes, all rebirths come from this misconception. That's the point. It's the source of all suffering. It's very simple. Okay, so one way, and this is Lama Tsongkhapa's favorite way, you know, and it's said to be the king of logics to prove emptiness, as Lama Yeshe says, is to see emptiness as the ultimate reality in the framework of conventional reality, the two truths, the two truths. There's different ways of describing the two truths. And this way is this two, that everything that does exist has a conventional character and an ultimate character. The two truths. So what does even mean everything that exists? This is a crucial point. When you study Buddhist philosophy, you learn, how long have we got? 90 minutes or 2 hours? I always forget.
2 hours.
Very good. Right, good. So we're fine. Okay, so so even that we have to start. When you first study Buddhist philosophy, you learn these terms. You learn about what exists. There are 6 or 7 or 5, I can't remember, synonyms for that which exists. Phenomenon, object, object of knowledge, established base, existent. That's 5. So they're all terms, synonyms for that which exists. And why is this important? Because it's very simple for the Buddha. He says right now, due to delusions, we're living in la-la land about what exists. That delusions are causing us to literally make up things that don't exist. This is exactly what Buddha's telling us. So attachment, when it's prevailing in the mind, literally makes the boyfriend look totally divine. Attachment sees that boyfriend through the lenses of your own fantasy, your own neuroses, your own hunger, your own nonsense, and literally makes up a picture and that boy appears to you, back to you, through the lenses of your attachment, and you believe he exists like that. Well, he doesn't. Anger, if I'm angry with that boyfriend because he's given me up for a younger version, he appears gross to me, he appears ugly, he's the cause of all my suffering. So now I see him through the lenses of my anger. And what I'm seeing and what he is are two separate things. This is the way Buddha talks across the board. Once we get this, we really understand Buddha's approach to life, you know. So the ego grasping, the colloquial term that's used for ignorance when it relates to grasping at the self, the I. Ignorance in general, marikpa, that's the deepest illusion which informs the attachment and informs the anger. So in other words, if like I'm attached to the chocolate cake, the attachment causes it to look extremely delicious. It causes the cake to vibrate with deliciousness. And then, of course, I'm believing that when I get the cake, it'll make me really happy. That's all the lies of attachment. So, but ignorance is informing that attachment. You can't have ignorance without the attachment. Attachment is the main voice of ignorance. So the ignorance is informing the attachment that causes the delicious cake to appear out there from its own side, having nothing to do with me. That's the function of the ignorance in there. And the function of the attachment is to make it look delicious. The function of the aversion is to make the boyfriend look ugly, but the function of ego grasping, of ignorance, is to make him look ugly from his own side. Out there, from his own side. So ignorance is informing all the delusions. And right now, ignorance informs all our virtues as well. Like you can get incredible compassion for somebody and have such empathy and such closeness because so much closeness. That's marvelous. But there's still an experience of intrinsic I having intrinsic compassion for intrinsic you. There's still a sense of a separateness. It's pretty close. It's pretty amazing. But when you realize emptiness, that also disappears. So ignorance informs even our virtues. But better than nothing, one step at a time. So, okay. So whatever exists, the definition of an existent is a nice one. It's that what exists, whatever exists, is by definition that which mind can cognize. So that's axiomatic for the Buddha. That what mind cognizes, that seals it as existing. Whereas for us, the mind is completely something weird and separate and not very exciting in the West. We think external things are the main point, you know. I think psychology is the lowest on the totem pole of all the sciences, isn't it? We don't trust it, you know. Opposite for the Buddha. Okay, so Buddha's saying everything that does exist conventionally, everything has a conventional existence. And what does that mean? Well, dependent arising is the shorthand for how everything exists conventionally. And what that means is, and Buddha taught 3 levels of dependence. I mean, there are many levels. There are countless ways in which things depend upon other things. But there's 3 specific things that Buddha taught, and particularly these are arguments with the prevailing views at the time, in the Hindu views, where he went as far as he could go in that views, and then he diverged in his own direction. And he presents 3 different levels of dependent arising. There are variations of all of this, but 3 essential levels of dependent arising that argue with the prevailing views at the time, because he said, you know, they didn't go far enough, so he went off his own direction, you know. So the first is that everything that's impermanent exists in dependence upon causes. Second, everything exists in dependence upon their bits and pieces, in dependence upon their parts. Third, finally, the real meaning, everything exists in dependence upon the mind calling it that. So we've got to, you know, unpack all these, you know, debate with these internally and externally, and then, you know, and with others, and because these are the logic to prove emptiness. This is the logic. Dependent arising is the king of logics, paraphrasing Lama Zopa Rinpoche, to prove the ultimate reality that there is no, what happened? There's no intrinsic thing from its own side, you know. Okay, let's just do a bit of analysis then. So many different ways we can use, so many different ways we can debate with this. So let's take the object, let's take the phenomenon, let's take the existent, let's take the established base called I. So the world we know consists of trillions of phenomena, isn't it? Cups and lamps and moments of mind and, you know, mathematics and statues and people. So the word person, I, self, me, all those words, they're synonymous. And they refer to a type of phenomenon that we are. We're not a toilet. We're not a lamp. We're not a cup. We don't fit the definition of that. We're a person. And I forget what the definition of a person is, but usually you define something first. If you want to discuss how things exist, and Buddha says right now we're living in la-la land about how things exist, so his whole purpose is to get us to be in touch with what exists, because that's what cuts suffering. And then we can help people. So we've got to, so that's why he wants to be clear about what does exist and what doesn't. So first, things have a conventional character, and you've got to get that clear first. So what's that, mummy? Well, darling, that's called a thermos. Well, what is it? What is it? She'll say. Well, she'll explain. Well, you know, I can see it's a flat-bottomed metal container, isn't it? And I'll get that. That's the first part of the definition. But then I'm not happy yet. I don't know what it is yet. And this is a really powerful point. When you want to understand emptiness, this is a really powerful point. What's its function? What's its job? Even you could say, what's its meaning? What does it mean? Well, sweetheart, its function is to hold my tea and keep it warm. Keep my tea warm, you know. Now that's the 2 parts of a definition. You know what it is. Its conventional characteristics is it's this flat-bottomed metal container, and its job is to make my tea, is keep my tea hot. Now we know the meaning of a thermos. Now we can discuss it. Now we can begin to discuss it, you know. We're good at this in science. We're very clear about our definitions, and we don't have arguments. Nobody argues about 1 + 1 is 2, because we've got our definitions clear. But if I say I love you and you say you love me, we think we communicate. No, my definition is one thing and yours is completely something else. And we have no communication when it comes to those types of things, because we don't define our terms clearly. That's why we're in such trouble. So let's look at the phenomenon called I, me, person, self, I. So then we first establish how it exists conventionally. So the first one is that it is a product, that the self, this I, is the product of many causes. That among all those causes, you will not find anything called I, because I is nothing other than the culmination of all those causes. That's dependent arising, according to the first level. We analyze that, debate that, and to conclude, oh, I see, there's no I from its own side. There's no I separate from the causes. Now, the next one is the one I want to talk about. It's kind of tasty. And these are roughly equivalent, as I said, with these views, the previous views that Buddha would argue with. So the second one is, you know, that the I, this self I, exists independent upon all its bits and pieces. So I like to use the analogy of if you bought something from IKEA. It's a really nice analogy. I like it. So, you know, you get your table coming from IKEA. And look, you know perfectly well, you don't get a table, you get all the bits. So, and this is a simple example. It's a really good example in many ways. When you open your box to get that table, you know, they didn't just chuck in a few legs and 64 screws and you have to try and work out what's necessary. They've been very rigorous and they've given you the exact number of legs, the exact number of parts, the exact number of screws, the exact number of bolts or whatever is necessary. So your table, you know, you don't see a table there. It's so evident, but we know all those parts, when you put them together, will produce a table. We understand this so clearly. Well, a person is exactly the same. So imagine you go to IKEA and you order a me, you know, you order a Catherine or a Robina or a Jackie, whatever you want. And this is not a joke, it's a really helpful analogy. So you're going to find all the bits there, right? So this is an interesting point. So, okay, the second one, the I, the Jackie, the Robina, the Catherine, exists in dependence upon those parts, that the Robina is made up of those parts. Now, Buddha's telling us that what we expect in that box is the legs, the eyes, the ears, the bits of anger, the bits of love, all the components, the thousands of components that make up you, all the millions of the bits of your body, all the elements and the this and the blood and the pee-pee and the caca and the veins and the ligaments. Look at the number of parts there are. That'd be a really big box, you know, very, very precise, big box. And then there are all the parts of the mind, aren't there? There's the anger, the love, the kindness, all the bits together. And you've got to put them all together to produce a Robina. But the piece that we're going to look for most, now where's the piece that's called I? Where's the special piece called Robina, without which it won't be a Robina? So what Buddha's telling us is, we believe there is another part in here besides the nose and the ear and the ligaments and the pee-pee and the caca. There's a special little piece that is called Robina, and it exists somewhere in here, and it's the intrinsic me, it's the special me, it's the owner, it's the puppeteer, it's the owner of the parts. We talk like that. I have a nose, we say. Don't you insult me, we will say. So there's two major mistakes we make, Buddha says. One, this first one, we believe there's another part in that box of all the legs we accept. There's leg, there's nose, there's ear. We get that. Put them all together. You can construct a perfect Robina, but we don't believe there's a real Robina until you have the special piece that you think must be in the box somewhere that's called I, the special part that you put in. And that's what soul means. That's what the Hindus called an Atman. That's what the Greeks call an essence, that there is this extra piece. The Christians absolutely have that. And that's the piece that makes you you. The self is the piece that makes you you. Buddha says, we don't need one of them, baby. It's unnecessary. You don't need one. You do, all the bits do fine on their own. So this is quite shocking. We think, well, where the hell's the I then? Because I mean, I certainly feel like there's an I. I'm thinking about it all day. Where's this I? So we've got to do analysis to argue with it. So this seems absurd to us initially, but this is a really good argument. So let's think of this one. Let's just make a statement first. It's a simple example. I tell you, I have a thermos and a mala. Okay. Now this is. They talk about this particular logical argument. This is, if something exists, it's either one or it's more than one. You can't have it any other way. So listen to this very simply. If you look at, as soon as I say to you, I have a thermos and a mala, you're going to use your intelligence and you're going to check that what I just said is true. You want to check that the words I say are in sync with truth. So how you prove that is you count the number of phenomena I just mentioned. So I mentioned, in fact, 3 phenomena. There's one, look at me, Conventionally, there's a piece called I. Now there's a piece called thermos, and there's a third piece called mala. So they're 3 separate, aren't they? In this case, a very simple example. They're 3 separate, independent phenomena. That means, independent in this case, there's many meanings of independent. In this context, independent means they don't depend upon each other to exist. My mala could break. My thermos does not have a panic attack. It can still function as a thermos. Robina can drop dead. The thermos will still keep the tea hot. The mala will still be there to count your mantras on it where the Robina's there. So Robina, in the 3 separate, simple, conventional phenomena we're discussing here, Robina, the existence of Robina does not depend upon a thermos and does not depend upon a mala. A mala does not depend upon a Robina or a thermos. This is a clear, simple example of 3 separate, independent phenomena. Easy, easy, and we can prove it's true. You can say, I just spoke the truth. Conventionally, just conventionally. Now I'll make another statement. I have a nose and an ear. Now, without analysis, we will also agree that that is true. There is my nose and there's my ear, but we don't analyze it, and that's what we have to do. So again, how many phenomena did I mention? Well, it was the same. I mentioned 3. I, one noun. Phenomena is like nouns, you know. The mind cognizes nouns. I is one noun. Nose is another noun, and ear is another noun. So you can see within the phenomenon called Robina, you can point out an ear and you can point out a nose. But now, where's that 3rd noun? Where's the piece called Robina that isn't a nose, that isn't an ear, and isn't in fact all the other thousands of parts? Because we believe there is. We say it. Oh, how dare, you know, how dare you insult me? I have a nose. That is mine. I have an ear, I'll say. It's 2 very vivid nouns. And the point is, well, we can point out the ear within this context, but we believe there is an object in here that is the referent object of the word I, that's separate and independent, like a little puppeteer, like an owner that runs the parts. That's a gross mistake. We all accept this. We take it for granted. Even when we hear this, we get confused. What do you mean? Of course there's an I in there. Buddha says, no. So the job is to search for it. This sounds hilarious. The job is to do unbelievable analysis in meditation to search for that separate I. So one logical argument to prove there can't be one. This is where it gets more nuanced now. In the same way that if my thermos breaks, my mala is literally unaffected. It has no relationship to the thermos. It is separate and independent. It will not be affected by the breaking of the thermos. We get that. Now, this is the point. If there is a separate I in there, another piece in the box that you found, the piece called I, as well as the piece called a leg, as well as a piece called a nose. If there is that separate piece, and that means it's independent, isn't it? It's not the screw, it's not the leg, it's not the ear, it's not the eye. It can't be. It's called I. So if there is that separate I, when you insult my nose, I will say, how dare you insult me? And you will say, no, Robina, I didn't insult you. I insulted your nose. So if there were a separate I, it would not be offended when the nose is insulted. If the nose is broken and there's pain in the nose, the I won't mind. It'll go, phew, I'm glad it wasn't me that was hurt. I know it sounds like a joke, but this is logic. But we don't think that way, do we? So this is where it's more nuanced now, because we do know there is an I, but not the way we think. There's not an independent I and there's not a separate I. But, as Lama Zopa puts it, there is, you know, the I is not the base. So the base is all the bits. So the I is not the base. The I can't be the ear. The I can't be the nose. This is another argument. But they're different. They're not separate. They're not separate, but they are different. They're not separate. You will not be able to find a piece called I in here anywhere. But there is an I that does exist interdependently, in dependence upon the parts. And this is where it gets more nuanced. So there is an I, but not the way we think. Then there is not a separate I, but it's not separate. You can't separate the I. The I is not the ear, but you can't separate them. The I is not the nose, but you can't separate them. But they're different. There is an I and there is an ear, but they're not separate, but they're different. So it's a more nuanced meaning than the previous one. These are the things we have to learn, you know. And this is the basis we use for the logic we have to learn to do in meditation to make this become an experience, you know. But this is not even the subtlest meaning. But this is a powerful logical argument we need to do. So the other argument, we either think the I is separate, or we think the I is everything, or with all of me is the I. Well, this is where Lama Zopa says the I can't be the base. How can the I be the parts? If the I is the ear, if the self is the ear, if the self is the ear, then self and ear are synonymous. If they're synonymous, they're not separate and they're not different. They would not be separate and they would not be different. So why would you say, I have an ear? They're two things. Rubbish. Can't be. Not possible. We have to do these are the logical arguments you have to use. To argue with ego's ridiculous misconceptions, to use logic to smash ego's nonsense, you know, and then eventually go to experience of this in meditation. Same with the cup, base. Look, my thermos, one noun, has a base. It has a lid. It has, a round part. That's a statement. So the word thermos, base is another word, lid is a fourth word, round part is a fifth word. So there are 5 things we just pointed out. Thermos, base, lid, round bit. Now, there's the lid, we can take it off. There's this part here, we can take that away. There's this part here, we can take it away. Where's the thermos? No such thing. You won't find a piece that's separate, but the thermos is nothing other than putting the thermos is the name we give to the parts. You define a base. What's the definition of a base? It's that round piece that is stuck on the bottom to stop the tea from falling out. That's not the definition of a thermos. What's the round part? That's the part that keeps it in what's the lid? They've each got their own word and their own definition. And each definition and each function is not the function or definition of the word thermos. Thermos is the label you give to all of it. But the thermos is not the parts. You can't find the thermos separate from the parts, but it's not the parts. And this is the final one. It is the name we impute upon the parts. This is the subtlest meaning of dependent arising, that I is the name we give to the parts. But you can't find an I that's separate from the parts, and you can't find an I that's oneness with the parts. But as His Holiness said, the I, or everything else, is not empty because you can't find it in here, and you won't find it. That's not the real premise, he said. The I is empty of independent existence because it's a dependent arising. And this is the final meaning of the two truths. This is when they come together completely inextricably linked together. That's the final meaning of emptiness, subtle dependent arising, you know. This is the Prasangika Madhyamika view that all our lamas discuss. This is the one we have to finally realize. So are there any questions from that? So let's say some more then. I'll just say some more then. This is very helpful to say some more things. The word emptiness, we get very confused. But it's really important to understand the use of the word emptiness. Remember that we've got different, the universe consists of phenomena, of objects of knowledge, existence. There are things that exist, and the definition is that which can be cognized by mind. So now, I'm colorblind, and I think this is pink, right? So in reality, we call this color black. We've all agreed in conventional reality, this is called black. We sign off on that. But I've got a misconception. My eyes are mistaken. It's a simple mistake. My eyes are mistaken. And because I'm mistaken my eyes, this black appears to me, back to me as pink. So you can tell me I'm wrong, and I keep trying to remember that it's not pink, but it appears to me as pink, so it's really hard. So you've got to try and help me. You've got to fix my eyes. You've got to fix my eyes. So you fix my eyes. You fix my eyes. And now you present the black again to me, and I will get the shock of my life. And we think that now because my eyes are fixed, I'm going to see the truth. Oh, it's black. There you go. No. Yeah, black will appear for a second, but what will happen is that appearance of black, which was now true for me, will be smashing into my misconception, which I've had for a long time, beginning as lifetimes, believing it's pink. So it will smash into my misconception, and I'll go, oh my God, it's not pink. Won't I? I'll say that. So then what's the name of the phenomenon that appeared to my mind? It's called the absence of pink, the emptiness of pink. Don't make it less complicated. I think there's tea in my thermos, and I go to drink it and I go, oh, my thermos is empty, I'll say. Well, the name of the phenomenon that just appeared to my mind is the emptiness of tea. It's abstract, it's a negative phenomenon, but it's a real phenomenon. So when your eyes are fixed, what will appear to your mind is the absence of pink. When I go to drink my tea with the expectation of tea, and I'll get a shock because there's no tea in the cup, what will appear to my mind will be the phenomenon called the absence of tea. If I think there's $5,000 in my bank account and I go to get it out and I get the shock of my life when I see zero, I will see the zero. It'll instantly appear to me like the black will appear when my eyes are fixed. But what really appears to my mind is, oh my God, where's my $5,000? So what appeared to my mind is the negative phenomenon called the absence of $5,000. This is ordinary life. We live like this. A better one, because these are unhappy absences, but a very happy absence would be if you think you've got cancer. You believe you've got cancer and you come home and you're shattered and you say it to your husband and you go through the whole process of coming to terms with the reality you're going to die and it's devastating and you're slowly working on it. And then one day you go back to your doctor because you've done Tong Len, and Lama Zopa was always quoting people who heal their cancer with their Tong Len or their something, you know. And they say, sorry, Robina, there's no cancer. So that's the realization of emptiness. You just realize the emptiness. You just cognize the emptiness of cancer. And that's blissful. But why? I mean, right now, I don't have cancer. And you say to me, you got no cancer, Robina. I'll say, who cares? Because I never thought I had cancer. But if I believed I had cancer, and then you tell me, no, there's now the absence of cancer existing in your body, it is completely blissful. That's how the yogis realize emptiness. We have believed since beginningless time in the presence of an I that just doesn't exist there. That cancer just doesn't exist there. That tea does not exist there. That $5,000 does not exist there. But we believed it did. And then when we see the truth, the thing that first appears to us is the absence of that thing that we thought was there. That's emptiness. So the emptiness of cancer. Then what do you realize after that? You're healthy. When you realize the emptiness of $5,000, you'll then realize the truth. There's nothing there. Then when you realize the emptiness of pink, you'll realize the truth. Black thermos. When you realize the emptiness of intrinsic me, you then realize the merely labeled me. That's the thing that does exist. So the conventional reality is that which does exist, and the emptiness is that which doesn't exist, and they both come to the same thing. So as Lama Zopa says, when you realize the emptiness of the I, for example, it's as if there is no I, but there is. But what does exist is so subtle, it's as if it doesn't. So this is the two truths together, the subtlest level of the two truths. And they come to, because when you realize dependent arising, that tells you emptiness. And when you realize emptiness, that tells you dependent arising. So anyway, the word, generally what I'm trying to get at here, the word emptiness is referring to something that exists. The biggest mistake in the world, in all the different teachings and people misunderstand apparently, is that we think it means nothing. And we can be forgiven for thinking that, because you won't find an I. There is no I in there. That feels like there's nothing. That's nihilism, and it's a mistake. That's not the real premise. So emptiness, the word emptiness I'm referring to is not meaning nothingness, but it's referring to the absence of something. The absence of something. And that's a real thing that does exist. So in other words, if I see tea in my cup, there is tea. The phenomenon is called tea. There is tea in my cup. Now, if there's no tea in my cup and I expect tea, the phenomenon that appears to me is another phenomenon, and it's a negating phenomenon, and it's called the absence of tea. That's what appears. That's why you go, oh my God, my cup's empty. What it just appeared to me is a phenomenon, a real phenomenon called the absence of tea. So if there is tea in this cup, the tea exists in the cup. If there's no tea in the cup, the absence of tea exists right there in the cup. Where does that, if there is $5,000 in the bank, $5,000 exists in the bank. If there is no $5,000 in the bank, where does it exist? Right there in the bank. If I put my hand in my pocket for $5 I think is there, and I go, oh, I just discovered what? I discovered the emptiness of $5. And that emptiness of $5 is a phenomenon that is real, that exists, and it exists exactly where I thought the $5 was. So this is emptiness of I exists on the aggregates. The emptiness of I isn't, oh, there's no I, might as well kill myself. No. Emptiness of I exists exactly on the dependent arising I. So emptiness of inherent I is equivalent of the dependent arising I. You've got to have the two truths together. This is the perfect way to never fall into the abyss of the great mistake, Tsongkhapa says, you know. Of course, we've got to think all these, know these words, learn them, and meditate and think about them, debate them, and then think about them. And one day the penny drops. And then when we finally realize it, when the greatest yogis in the subtlest level of meditation, as Lama Yeshe points out in Mahamudra, you cannot realize emptiness without single point of concentration. You've got to access this subtle level of your mind. The grosser level of the mind is not capable. We can do this thinking at this level. We can get tastes of it. But to get the direct realization of the truth of the absence of the inherent I right here, you have to have single point of concentration. And for the greatest yogis, for the greatest yogis, when they discover finally, they see nakedly the emptiness, the absence of the I they thought was there since beginningless time. For the almost greatest yogis, they have unbelievable fear when they realize this. But the greatest yogis, as Lama Zopa says, they have just incredible bliss. Finally, they are seeing for the first time directly the absence of something that they have believed in since beginningless time, that has never existed, that could not exist, that doesn't exist and could never exist. This is a more dramatic emptiness. Tea could exist. $5,000 could exist. Pink could exist. Cancer could exist. There are simple analogies. This one is a much more radical absence because it could never exist. And the realization of that truth is what then cuts the cause of all suffering and all samsara. You've got more work to do, but you can't fall back after that. All the work we're talking about, junior school, high school, university, all of it leads to this. And this is done for the bodhisattva in conjunction with their outrageous practice of bodhicitta. Bird needs two wings, wisdom and compassion. Any questions about that, people? Just a few words. Can't say much more. About my nose again. I'm so sorry. This is dry Santa Fe. Is it? It's down low in Denver, isn't it? You're not up high, are you, in Denver?
We are a little lower though, 5,000 feet.
Oh, okay, we're 7. I think we're 7.
Mm-hmm. But it's dry here too.
That's true. That's right. So are there any questions, please? Any old, I don't care, just any old questions, whatever you like. I mean, I don't know that much, but I can see if I can help. Huh? People? Nothing? Got 30 more minutes to go. You want me to keep talking to you? So, okay, let's see how the relevance of emptiness to transforming problems. It's pretty obvious, you know. I mean, if you can realize there's no I that's there in the first place, I mean, God, you can do anything. This is why the outrageous stories of the bodhisattvas. There's a lovely story. I remember Courtin Senta Rinpoche, this wonderful Lama who died many years ago. I remember him saying, I'll never forget, he said, for a certain level bodhisattva, and I'm assuming they understood emptiness, the Arya bodhisattva. He said, for this level bodhisattva, the action of cutting off their hand and feeding it to a starving animal is as inconsequential as a leaf falling off a tree. So that's, you know, in normal terms is insane. But there's no way a person with just emptiness, I think, could do that. That's the bodhicitta part, but there's no way without emptiness you could also do that either. It's the combination of the two. Because when there's no thought of a separate I, when there's a recognition from emptiness that there's no intrinsic I, not to mention the incredible compassion that's caused you to transform yourself into wanting only to help others, then it's just like nothing. It's like literally nothing. You know, that's why the story of Lama Zopa, I always give the story of Lama Zopa when he's a little boy. I tell that story, didn't I? When he was drowning. Remember that story? I'll tell you again the story, when Laudo Lama, you know, I did mention, I'm sure. And he is recognized as a reincarnation of this holy yogi, this Nyingma yogi in the past life, Kunsang Yeshe. He was a layman and a meditator. And he lived in his cave for many years and passed away. as a great yogi. And of course, these great yogis can completely control their life, can control their death, and control their rebirth. So anyway, little Lama Zopa, a little boy, he was very small, and from the time he could crawl, every time Mummy would turn her back, little Zopa's gone. You know, he's crawling up the hill where they know the Laudo cave is from the previous Lama. And they'd always find him curled up with his little bare bottom, you know, asleep at this little spot halfway up the path where they called the resting spot, you know, because it's quite a steep walk. So every time from the time he could talk, they always keep finding him and dragging him home. Come home. He'd say, no, that is my home. So, you know, these little reincarnated lamas, they all, when they're young, they're very small, they have very clear memory of who they were in the past. They lose it as they get older, they say. So anyway, he behaved in a very unusual way. When he played games, he always played the role of a lama and did pujas, and he'd make mud pie dorjis and mud pie pujas and mud pie bells. And he'd always announce that his benefactors were coming to his puja, all the previous benefactors from his past life. So anyway, the mummy kind of finally checked up with the local lama, and they did their divinations, and it came out that it seemed like he was the reincarnation of the Laudo Lama, this great yogi. So Lama's over there, when he's taken up to the mountains one time, there's a cave, some monastery, Roaling, some 8 hours up beyond where he lived. So this story he tells always, he's told this story in different ways. When I heard it, he said that he was about 8 at the time, which would have been about 1952 or something. And he never met white people. So across this river, big, very, very powerful rivers up there, you know, there was these strange looking people. He said they had straw-colored hair, pale eyes. Sounds like Swedes, isn't it? The white people, basically. Looks like Denise. Pale, straw-colored hair. No, you've got white hair, darling. Anyway, he wanted to meet these people. His manager was worried because these little rickety bridges, you know, and very dangerous, and the rivers are very dangerous. He doesn't want to lose some Rinpoche, you know. So anyway, Rinpoche is very determined. So he got his bowl of potatoes, his gift for these people, and walked across the bridge. But he fell in. He fell in the water. Of course, they don't teach him swimming up there, so he's drowning. But this is how he told the story. He said, the head. Not my head, or I came to the surface for air. Not I came to the surface for air. The head. So then he saw his manager panicking, running up and down the bank, you know. And then he said, then the thought occurred to me, the person known as the Laudo Lama is about to die. The person known as the Laudo Lama is about to. So all this way they talk, what I'm getting at is this powerful way we have to learn to cultivate, to think about. Instead of this constant, this is my nose, my anger, my love. It's a powerful practice to be more objective. There is anger, there is love, there is nose. It's like it's a powerful way to help you get to realize this is not just a big lump of me here, you know. This is automatic in his mind at the age of 8. Then he said, I didn't know anything about emptiness, which meant in that life he'd never heard the words of emptiness. But once you realize emptiness, you can't lose it. Once you've got it, you can't lose it for eternity. It's gone. You've cut samsara. So clearly we can deduce from the way he talked at the age of 8 that he'd realized emptiness, obviously from the past life. And then he said, I didn't know anything about emptiness. And this is the point now, but there was no fear. This is what's so shocking in our culture psychologically. Because we factor fear in as the most normal part of a normal person. And it was Mr. Darwin, wasn't it? Or somebody who talked about, you know, all the animals with fear, flight, all that business, you know, there's instinct for survival. And we factor that in as a major component of every being who exists. And indeed, if you look at ordinary beings, we indeed have an instinct for survival. We have an instinct to protect the me. Well, instinct for survival, I think, is a great synonym for ego grasping, for ignorance, for grasping at self-existent me, because it is rooted in fear. The main energy of ego grasping, and therefore all the delusions, is fear. Look at the way we suffer. Why do you think we talk about panic, worry, anxiety? I mean, look at the levels of fear. That's because we have ego grasping. That's why we suffer so tremendously. But if you have realized emptiness, you have literally cut the belief in an intrinsic I, in a separate I, in an independent I. So there literally is no fear. This is really hard to hear in our world, you know, but this is exactly a description of Buddha's view of the universe and Buddha's view of what we can all accomplish, you know. So how amazing, can you imagine? And this is the point, we can understand this. Look at when, look at people or yourself and look on the spectrum of your level of practice. In the beginning, we're just full of anxiety and worry and neurosis and fear and me and it's not fair. But as you begin to control your body and speech, you already start to calm down. As you begin to control your attachment and your anger, you calm down even more. So already you're lessening this neurosis. You're less fearful, less neurotic, less angry, less attached, and you keep on going. You add bodhicitta, then you add emptiness, then of course there's going to be no such thing as fear, no such thing as delusions. It's a gradual progress, psychologically. I mean, this is the Buddha's view. It's kind of outrageous. Can't wait. Looking forward to it. And that's why every time you transform problems and you greet the problem, one, you're smashing ego grasping, which is the belief in the separate me, and two, you're smashing self-cherishing. And you're smashing all the other delusions. So it's such a powerful practice. Every time you greet that problem, you are smashing samsara. Every time you say, okay, I can wait for the pill, have a headache for 10 more minutes, that's okay, I'm still happy, then you are smashing. You're putting eons of, you're putting atomic bombs under ego grasping, and you're putting atomic bombs under self-cherishing. You're doing both at the same time. That's why these practices are so potent. They're helping you practice, get compassion, and they're helping you get emptiness. Such a powerful practice. Transforming problems, greeting the problems, learning to like problems like we like ice cream. And according to our capacity, of course. Any questions? Come on, you folks. Must be something. I'm running out of voice again. You guys have got to talk. 20 more minutes. Nothing? Nobody wants to talk to me. Nobody wants to talk to me. Oh, I'm going to cry.
I think Denise has a question.
Good, Denise. Talk to me, honey.
I've been thinking about grief lately, and
what
is grief?
You tell me what you mean by it first.
Well, when someone is dying and you're watching them die,
okay,
or someone died, and you experiencing grief, and I'm just curious about it.
I understand. So I hear you, Denise. It's a very good question. So let's analyze it, because I think when we look at the Buddhist model of the mind, they list all these different states of mind very precisely. And there's none called grief. So I think grief, the way we call it, is a mixture of various states of mind. Do you understand? It's a mixture. So I would suggest that depending on the person, there could be enormous, so let's say it's my baby. Let's say I'm an ordinary person, I have no understanding of karma, I have no understanding of emptiness, and I'm very attached to my baby. Do you understand my point here, Denise? Then I would say in that grief, the majority of the states of mind are attachment. So that's where the unbelievable pain comes from. The pain, if we experience suffering, it's from delusions. Suffering is not a function of compassion or empathy. If you have compassion and empathy, that's not called suffering. You might have tears, but that's connectedness. And you understand, Dalai Lama, when he talked about his mother dying, there are tears. But because if he's who he is, he's got no ego, therefore there is no suffering. So we don't make this distinction. We think if you're crying, it's called suffering. No, suffering is a function of delusions. So if I'm overwhelmed with attachment to my baby, without knowing my mind, without any practice, without recognizing anything, then the 90% of my grief would be because of attachment. And that's why some people never heal themselves, because their attachment can never get rid of. And there's just this constant sense of unbelievable loss. That's because of attachment. So it depends on the person, darling. Dalai Lama would not have had grief. He would have not have had attachment. He had compassion. He cried when he talked about his mummy, because he was thinking of the kindness and the good quality of his mother. And he would indeed think of her and be sad that she's not there, but it would never come from delusions. And that's the big distinction that Buddhism makes. If there's attachment, then some people, when people lose something or lose a friend, they get angry. There's anger there people talk about when their husband dies, or it's like when the husband leaves them, they get raging angry. That's because attachment didn't get what it wanted. That's the cause of your suffering. That's why when the relationship breaks up, the pain is unbelievable. That's only because of attachment. So this is the major way we have to understand in Buddhism. Then, of course, I mean, if you don't have much attachment to that person, but you love them a lot, maybe you love your baby. Love is a delight that your baby be happy. Your baby, you know, it's not attachment. Love and attachment are completely separate states of mind. But for us, they're completely conflated, and we experience them as the same. But they're two separate parts of our mind. And this is what's amazing about the Buddhist psychological view. And unless we understand this, we won't understand Buddhism properly. Do you understand what I'm saying, Denise?
I do.
So if there's not much attachment and you understand karma, you will be, so of course you'll be sad, you'll be brokenhearted, but you will heal very quickly, because attachment holds on to the idea. And also because when you've got attachment, you believe things are permanent. So we're so shattered when a baby dies, because it just doesn't seem possible that a baby should die. But if you understand impermanence and you understand attachment and you understand karma, your suffering will be there, but you will be healing much more quickly, because there won't be so many delusions. Your heart will be sad, of course, and you'll think of your baby because there's a close karmic connection with you and that baby. But the suffering will be much less kind of severe. Do you understand what I'm saying, Denise?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Good question.
Thank you.
Good. What else, people? Anything?
This is Dana. I have a question.
Go, Dana. Good, darling.
Can you talk a little bit about the difference, if there is a difference, between ego grasping and self-cherishing?
Good, exactly, yes. Ego grasping is just a colloquial term, you know, really the self-grasping, ego grasping. Lama Yeshe calls it ego mind. They're just colloquial terms for the root delusion called ignorance, ma rigpa, that believes in the intrinsic me. This is the specific term for the root delusion, such that when you've uprooted it, that's the realization of emptiness. Do you understand what I'm saying? So ego grasping is a colloquial term for that root delusion. Self-cherishing is a consequence of attachment. So when you study the mind, the text Lorig, you know, you study the different states of mind, the negative states, the positive ones. Well, there's this kind of package of different states of mind. And ego grasping is there are 84,000, Buddha says, but he subsumes them all to three, which is these three poisons they talk about. You know that well. The three toxic emotions. The root one is this ignorance, or known colloquially as ego grasping or self-grasping, when it clings to the me. Then there's attachment to get what that me wants. And then when attachment doesn't get what it wants, that's aversion. They're the three main delusions. And they're very specific, do you understand? But they've each got a very precise role, and they each have a very intimate relationship. The sense, the grasping at a me is the root one. Then the attachment to get what that me wants is the next one. And then the aversion and the panic and the anger and the despair or the upset or the frustration when it doesn't get what it wants. We live in these three all the time. We run between attachment and aversion 1,000 times a day. And then jealousy and all the other dramas come as a result of these. These are all the delusions, the neuroses. So attachment is the main one. But like I said, in the Bodhisattva path, it's framed in a very particular way. And as a result of that attachment, which is a result of ego grasping, we then cherish me most. And that's seen on the Bodhisattva path as the main enemy, because we're trying to turn that around and cherish others most. Give up putting me first and put others first. So self-cherishing got this very specific framework in the Bodhisattva path. Do you understand? And it's a result of attachment. It's because of attachment. It's another way of putting attachment, basically. But it's very specific in relation to the Bodhisattva path. Do you understand the point?
Yeah, thank you.
Good, Dana. So you, Jackie, you had a question, darling? Yes, Jackie.
I'm slow, technically slow.
No
Last week, it has to go with the relationship between emptiness and what we talked about last week, what you talked about, Tonglen.
Yes,
because
good.
It seems to me that Tonglen can be real, can be true, because we're interdependent, because we're not independent entities.
I understand. So what do you mean by
related?
Yeah, so I need to know what you mean by Tonglen can be real. What do you mean by that, sweetheart?
Because at one point you indicated we can't really take on other people's suffering. And I think, oh, I hope we can. I hope that's wrong. You know, I'm hoping to prove that.
No, I understand. No, that's not quite what I meant. What I meant was, I've got to be very clear. when we do Tonglen, all I was trying to say is one of the misconceptions is that when you sit down to do Tonglen, you're an ordinary person and you're practicing, we think that the purpose of the meditation is to get a headache. Are you hearing my point here? And then you're disappointed. Oh, I didn't get a headache. I mustn't have practiced Tonglen properly. So that's what I'm getting at is what Tonglen is a training to imagine that if you could, you would rather have that headache, and you practice thinking that. So in the end, of course, when you are a bodhisattva, you will not just get a headache, you'd give your life for somebody else. You would literally rather jump under the bus than someone else. That's an extreme example of the actual result of having accomplished this outrageous Tonglen, which is when you have made that shift, when others really are now more important than you. But it's sort of like thinking, well, I've got to learn to ride a bike, and I've got to get on the bike and ride the bike. To think that I've got to suddenly be like Lance Armstrong overnight is like nonsense. You're training to be like Lance Armstrong. So your aim isn't, I've got to get a headache. I've got to get a headache. That's just not the point. You're training your thoughts to want to have the headache if you could, because you would rather have it than them. It's an attitude, a powerful attitude. And of course, if you train like that every day, eventually you will be able, of course, you'll be able to take on the suffering of others. But, but in the end, you can't take away the suffering from another person because that's due to their karma. They've got to do that work. It's a way of getting incredible compassion, Jackie. Are you with me? It's more nuanced than you're suggesting. Do you understand my point?
Yes, and I think
you're absolutely right in your assumption. Yes, because when you realize emptiness, like, that, in other words, that the bodhisattva who cut his hand off, for him, the action was as inconsequential as a leaf falling off a tree. That level of is only because he's realized emptiness and because he's got Tonglen. Hey, eat for breakfast, have my other limb as well, no problems. They're able to do that level of compassion and emptiness, absolutely. Do you understand my point, Jackie?
Yes.
That's why I always tell the story too about our friend Harry, and it's about Laudo. We got to the last 3 years, we've done a trek up to Laudo. This year, of course, we didn't do it. We hope to do it next year again. We raised money for Lama Zopa's place up there. It's a wonderful place up in the mountains. It's 12,000 meters. I forget how many meters. I forget now. I'm so used to Santa Fe being 7,000. I forget, 14,000 meters. I can't remember how many meters it is. Anyway, it's quite up high in the mountains. And then up there, and people go up there to meditate. And so our friend Harry is a meditator. He lives in Colorado. He's been meditating for years, and there's a story he told that when he was going up there one time, he was at Courtin, and he was packing his bag and ready to go up to the mountains, up to his cave. He has a cave up there, up above where Lama Zopa's cave is. So he was heading off, and Lama Zopa said that he had a dream that Harry would die and get a message to him not to go. Well, Lama Zopa doesn't sleep, so he's just being polite. That was his clairvoyance. He could see that Harry was going to die, so he tried to get a message, but there was no phones at that time. It was back in the early 90s, probably. Maybe the 80s, I don't remember. No, 90s, that's right. And then, or maybe late 80s. And there was no message. You couldn't get a message to him. So he told Geshe Lama Kontrong, this amazing Lama who lived in the mountains for years, who was then living at Courtin. He said to please pray for Harry. So anyway, Harry told the story to me later. He was walking up the mountain, and it was very treacherous, and they had to take a side path because there'd been an avalanche or something, and it was very treacherous, and it was very dangerous, and people fall off these, the supporters with their packs, they fall off these mountains and die, the yaks fall off. So anyway, Harry told the story roughly like this. He was with another nun. I think she probably told the story first. He's got his pack on his back, like his 20-kilo pack, whatever, and he's walking up this very treacherous path. And he sees coming down very quickly and very suddenly, he sees these 4 Sherpas with their big packs. When you see these guys, got these massive packs. They carry 60 kilos on their back, and their head is, and they're bent over. All they can do is see their feet, So it's really treacherous. Even when you haven't got a pack on your back, it's treacherous. These roads are unbelievable. So anyway, he said, and he's a meditator. He's meditated in the mountains for years, And he said, people always say, oh, Harry's a bodhisattva. And I thought, oh, yeah, that's fine. I'm sure he is. He's a lovely guy. But then when you hear these stories, you think, well, that sounds like the proof. So anyway, he said, his first thought, when he saw these Sherpas coming really quickly, he said, there are 4 of them. There's 1 of me. There's this whole practice when you talk about transforming problems, you use this logic to smash ego's view that I'm more important. Well, 4 people's more than 1. I'm 1, therefore, so then they should come first. So anyway, he said to himself, then I will step to the side. So he stepped to the edge of the cliff, the edge of the path, not against the cliff. And he said, And he said, I will step to the side. So he stepped close to the edge, let them pass. And it was also quick. Then he said to himself, if they knock me, I won't hold on. So they knocked him, and he didn't hold on. They didn't mean to knock him. I mean, they're concentrating on not falling off the mountain. It's so intense. And then he's starting to fall. His pack is pulling him. His feet are on the ground still. And he said, I had a psychic vision of the entire fall. I saw my body crash to the ground. It was like 1,000 feet down, you know. And then he said, as he's falling, his feet are on the ground still, I felt the hands of Geshe Lama Kontrog forcefully pushing me, and I reversed direction, and he fell into the path, you know. So that there's no way in the universe that you would have that spontaneous thought if you hadn't practiced Tonglen for years, Jackie. We can have big moving thoughts, I'd love to help sentient beings, but if you haven't realized emptiness and you haven't done Tonglen, the first instinct is to go against the back of the cliff and hope they don't fall off, you know. First, because that's the primordial thing of ego. But he obviously had conquered that. He put them first immediately. He stood to the edge. They knocked him, and he didn't hold on. And then because of the power of his bodhicitta and because of Geshe Lama Kontrog's power, when you're a highly evolved being, you can be whatever you want to be to help sentient beings. You can do it, you know. And because of his merit, these hands pushed him in the reversed direction. So I think that's a very nice story. That's Tonglen, baby. Do you understand?
Yeah, that's the inspiration I was looking for.
There you go, darling. So
Thank you.
But that's with emptiness as well as bodhicitta. Without emptiness, that perhaps wouldn't happen, you know. It's when there's someone cutting off his hand. And that's the thing about the cutting off the hand. You'd think, well, surely he's got a nervous system. He must notice the pain. Yes, he would notice. But this is the point that's very shocking for us. His compassion and his realization of emptiness will be so enormous that the thought that the bit of pain was literally as inconsequential as a leaf falling off a tree. And I think there are good examples of this. I think in our culture you hear about what mothers do. I remember watching on the television years ago about outrageous things that mothers do to save their babies. So that an ordinary mother was attachment, but because of a fierce connection to her baby, this one mother ran into a burning house. Now you think about this. If she'd sat there for a second and realized, oh my God, it's a burning house, fear would overtake her and she couldn't move. But all she had in her mind was her baby. She had single pointed focus on her baby. So the fire was irrelevant. One woman was able to pick a car up to save her baby. That's just ordinary people. So a bodhisattva who's got no ego and infinite compassion, literally cutting off your hand. There's these stories of bodhisattvas cutting off one hand, then another one, then giving his limbs, you know, and then we can't imagine that because all we have got is ego grasping. All we have got is attachment. It's impossible to imagine you can advance your mind to that degree, but that's what we're capable of. That's what we're capable of, you know. So it's good to look forward to. Inspiration, as you said, Jackie. And here's all the methodology, all these amazing beings for 2,500 years since the Buddha living these practices. They're living extant, real living practices. They're not dead yet. And they're living among the Tibetans, certainly the ones we're talking about, you know. So how fortunate we are to still meet these holy beings before the dark ages have come, before Buddhism collapses off the planet. So that's it. 5 minutes to go. Any questions? We've finished our 4 days. We finished, aren't we, Catherine? Are we finished? Well, I mean, I'm sure I didn't cover everything that it's supposed to be, but we said a few things, didn't we? Enough for food for thought, hopefully. Okay. Any more questions, sweethearts? No? All right. So we can finish. We'll just finish with four immeasurable thoughts, these outrageous, brave attitude of the bodhisattvas, okay? 4 immeasurable thoughts. So we think how wonderful it would be if all sentient beings could abide in equanimity, free of attachment, aversion, and ignorance. May they abide so. So this is the brave attitude of the bodhisattva, the courageous attitude of the bodhisattva. So just to say it again, I think I said it before, there's compassion, but then there's great compassion. And this is the outrageous level of bodhisattva, of the compassion of the bodhisattvas. Not only, oh my God, look at that suffering, but what can I do to take it away? It's this personal responsibility, universal responsibility, as His Holiness says. That's the attitude of the bodhisattva, this great compassion, and then the special attitude, they sometimes call it, that it's my job. That's the powerful one of the bodhisattva. So I will make this happen. Please, Guru Buddha, bless me to be able to do this. How wonderful it would be if all sentient beings could be free of suffering and its causes. And causes are karma and delusions. May they be free. I will make this happen. Please, Guru Buddha, bless me to be able to do this. How wonderful it would be if all sentient beings could have happiness and its causes. And first, giving up negative karma and giving up delusions is the cause of happiness. And then, of course, realizing emptiness. And then, of course, realizing bodhicitta. May they have them. I will make this happen. Please, Guru Buddha, bless me to be able to do this. How wonderful it would be if all sentient beings were never parted from higher rebirths and liberations, excellent bliss. May they never be parted. I will make this happen. Please, Guru Buddha, bless me to be able to do this. And so we think no matter how long it is, no, it doesn't matter how long it is, it doesn't matter if we know this is possible, if we know the path is there, if we know the methodology is there, if we know there are people there who've done it, this gives us incredible confidence. Then we just have to do it one step at a time with confidence, you know, one step at a time with confidence, because it's true, because it's been done. So it gives us not just cross our fingers and hope for the best and go one step at a time according to our own capacity, you know, never giving up. That's the attitude of the Bodhisattva, never give up. Enthusiasm, you know, I can do it. And that's what sustains us in the face of incredible suffering. So all these seeds we planted, all this time we've been together, how fantastic. Thank you so much for having me. And all together we're discussing all these things, and it's so good, it's helpful for me to have to say it. It's helping me understand these things better, so thank you. All the seeds we've all planted in our minds that won't go astray. Maybe we nourish these seeds with our practice from this moment forward, so that we do become a Buddha just like we motivated. So we can lead all sentient beings to enlightenment, just like our holy beings, just like Lama Zopa Rinpoche, just like His Holiness, just like these amazing examples in front of us. And may bodhicitta grow and grow in the hearts of all. May the realization of emptiness grow and grow in the hearts of all. Bird needs two wings, wisdom and compassion. Jangchub Semchog Rinpoche Ma Ke Panam Ke Yuchi Ke Panyampa Me Payang Gong Ne Gong Lu Basho. And may all our holy lamas live long. Whoever our lamas might be, our own Buddhas, you know, the ones who are Buddha for us, may they live long lives. We all need them badly. And Lama Zopa Rinpoche, whose center it is, and you know, and then His Holiness Dalai Lama, may they live long lives to continue to inspire us. And I thank you for what you're doing there, you people. It's wonderful. Keep going. Thank you, darlings. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you, everybody. Much love. And you people in Laguna Beach as well. There you are. Andrew and Carly. Thank you, darlings.
Thank you, Venerable Robina.
Thank you, sweethearts.
Thank you, Venerable Robina.
Thank you,
Lama Yeshe House, thanks you for your teachings, and we offer you this virtual kata and offering to please return soon.
Thank you, so I will. And so easy now, so you can invite me anytime. I've got, you know, I mean, like in the morning I'll have Moscow, the afternoon I'll have something else, in the evening I'll have Denver. So it's really easy. I'm so happy. You know? It's the whole world now. It's wonderful. So I'm happy to help. I'm happy to be one of you. You just use me when you can. Don't hesitate.
Thank you. Thank you. And I don't know if you all know, Venerable Robina is giving us teaching this weekend for Thupten Norbaling on death and dying starting tomorrow night.
Okay. Thupten Norbaling.
And using Lama Zopa's amazing book. You know, it's been done as a paperback now, and it's called How to Face Death Without Fear. It's a marvelous handbook. It's fantastic. So we're going to go through all that. Thank you, sweethearts. Much love. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, Venerable Robina.